Li Bai, Hard Road number 1. In my golden cup, pure wine, worth 10,000 a pint. On a jade plate, fine food, worth 10,000 coins. I stop drinking and put down my chopsticks, unable to eat. Draw my sword to dance, look anxiously in all directions. I want to cross the yellow river, but ice blocks my way. I want to climb Mount Taihang, but snow fills the sky. In idleness, I drop a hook into the azure creek. Suddenly, I'm back in my boat, dreaming of distant places. Traveling is hard. Traveling is hard. So many forks in the road. Which one to take? A great enterprise must find the right moment. I hoist my sail into the clouds and cross the mighty ocean. So here we have the first of three ballad-style poems on the same topic and on the same general format, I imagine. These three hard road poems by Li Bai. Now, we've talked a lot about Li Bai before. He was quite the traveler, especially after he was not very successful at gathering imperial support after some brief stints at the Hanlin Academy in the capital, and especially after the convulse period that followed the Al Nushan rebellion. Li Bai mainly became a wanderer, going through different parts of China, being hosted by different patrons. Especially the area he generally haunted was the Yangtze River Valley, where in fact he died, I believe. So he was quite a traveler. Now, this topic, Hard Road, with a title like this, can only be about parting and traveling, which is a very common topic in Chinese poetry. The sadness, the misery a traveler experiences through the hardships of the road and through being far from friends and relatives, and perhaps from positions of power. I would say this poem has really another topic. It's not really, in spite of its appearance, it's not really a poem about traveling. It's rather a poem about complaining indirectly at his merit not being recognized. So it's a poem about his frustrations at not being called to court and not being able to do great things. So Li Bai was a great poet who was recognized in his lifetime as a maverick, as a genial wordsmith. But we might imagine that he probably had some ambitions for power and prestige and a courtly life, even if not the life of the scholar official. But that was not to be. So again, I would say the main real topic of this poem is merit unrecognized, and more specifically, Li Bai's merit not being recognized. The poem is pretty straightforward. Let's go, as usual, bit by bit and comment on different aspects. So, in the translation, the poem has two stanzas. The first one seems to be describing a state of reverie in which it doesn't appear to be really a series of experiences that Li Bai is living. It seems more like they are a series of visions that Li Bai is reminiscing while he's on a boat traveling somewhere. And the last stanza is more of a philosophical reflection on the difficulty of making choices in life and of his merit unrecognized and of his resignation to this situation. In my golden cup, pure wine worth 10,000 a pint. On a jade plate, fine food worth 10,000 coins. I stop drinking and put down my chopsticks, unable to eat. Draw my sword to dance, look anxiously in all directions. So the poem starts with this Epicurean gaze, we could say, of a richly set forth table with delicious and expensive food and drink. Perhaps he is being, in his usual Li Bai style, hyperbolic at describing the drink and the food as worth 10,000 coins each, which would have been an outrageous amount. But then again, Li Bai was, as opposed to Du Fu, he managed to live a life of relative material prosperity and ease. And it's not completely unthinkable that he would have been able to enjoy these luxuries. But anyway, he's not interested in luxurious food. That's not an end in itself, or at least not the end of an ambitious poet and an ambitious person. So stopping the eating and drinking, the banqueting, he draws his sword for a dance and looks anxiously in all directions. Now, when he was young, Li Bai was trained in the use of the sword, not only in composing poetry. So he could manage the sword, and we've talked about the sword dance, which was one of the new dances brought from the Central Asia during the Tang era and during Xuanzong's emperorship. Perhaps Li Bai had learned how to dance it, but anyway, this desire to dance with the sword while looking anxiously seems to steer us towards the main topic of the poem, which is Li Bai might be able to live a life of ease and splendor, but that is not what fills him, that is not what satisfies him. He is looking anxiously because he would like to be employed in some way or other, perhaps as a soldier, perhaps as a poet, perhaps as a politician, as a governor. We continue with an indirect expression of his desires. I want to cross the Yellow River, but ice blocks my way. I want to climb Mount Taihang, but snow fills the sky. So I don't know where he is when he is composing this poem, but presumably he is probably south of the Yellow River. But anyway, the Yellow River and Mount Taihang are used here, I believe, symbolically. So he's talking as a wanderer. I want to go to this place, but I can't. I want to go to this other place, but it's inaccessible because of the weather. Both are probably meant to be symbols for the court and the capital. Yeah? The Yellow River, the capital was in the Yellow River Valley. Well, more precisely in the Wei River Valley, but the Wei was a tributary of the Yellow River. Well, both capitals. Luojiang was in the Luo River, but that was also a tributary of the Yellow River. And Mount Taihang, high mountains and heavenly spaces were generally used as synonymous with the imperial court. So he probably wishes to serve the emperor and the court, but there are obstacles, and we know that in his last years, Li Bai encountered many obstacles because he supported, after the abdication of Emperor Xuanzong, he temporarily got himself involved in the party of one of the royal princes that was in the south, who was not elected emperor, and in fact Li Bai was sentenced to death. He managed to save his neck in extremis, we would say. So his return to the world of the court and the capital is probably barred, and he is frustrated. He knows that in spite of his desires, it's all a dream. The obstacles are very real. So what does he do? In idleness, I drop a hook into the azure creek. Suddenly, I'm back in my boat, dreaming of distant places. Any possibility of going back to the court and perhaps even that luxurious life that was described through luxurious dishes in the beginning, perhaps that was also a reverie as well. Li Bai is far from the world of the court, from his prosperous days. He's living the retired life. Remember, the fisherman is very commonly used in Chinese poetry as a symbol of the hermit, of the person who retires from the world and dedicates himself or herself to the simple pleasures of the simple life, of living in the countryside, of doing peaceful chores like fishing, and so on. And yet he does not feel completely content with this life of ease. He's always dreaming of distant places. He's an ambitious person. Second stanza. Traveling is hard. Traveling is hard. So many forks in the road. Which one to take? A great enterprise must find the right moment. I hoist my sail into the clouds and cross the mighty ocean. So many paths in the road. Life is... This is a very common metaphor in some writers and in a lot of literary traditions. Life, which is the passage of time, can be equated with traveling as in the passage through space. And just as in space we have to take different forks, different paths, and they lead to different places, in time we make different decisions at different moments, and they are effectively paths that block other paths. Many choices have to be made in life. One generally does not have the knowledge to choose the right ones, and this is what Levi is lamenting here, and a reverberation of this comes to my mind in a poem by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. It is a 20th century poem about the very same idea that has just been expressed here. Taking paths is difficult, and in the case of Frost, he takes the more unconventional path, and you could say that Levi also takes the path less taken, and that has meant everything to him as well. He has become a glorious poet, and he will be remembered. But he hasn't achieved, perhaps, the satisfaction of the more typical Confucian and contemporary ambitions of being recognized, of being next to the emperor, of co-ruling the world. So he says, a great enterprise must find the right moment. So this is the idea that even if you are virtuous, even if you have the qualities for ruling, destiny is destiny. And it's like the Western conception of fortune, it's blind. So it's Ming, your destiny, which means you might be virtuous and you might be the ideal person for a job, but if you don't meet the right time and the right people, you will not be able to satisfy this great enterprise. This is a common trope that appears in poetry and in historical texts. So people, I remember one general we've mentioned, Li Ling, or Li Guang, I think it was Li Guang, who was a great general but always encountered misfortune. And in one of the historical chronicles, he laments, if I had lived at the time of the founder of the dynasty, I would have become a marquis. But I live in these other times, and my lot is a negative one. Here, Levi seems to be implicitly expressing the same thought. I am meritorious, but for the great enterprise, the great enterprise that includes me, another time will have to come, perhaps in another life. So the only thing that remains is to really accept with resignation one's path in life. I hoist my sail into the clouds and cross the mighty ocean. So this might be interpreted in many ways. I would like to interpret it as, I'll continue in the great ocean of poetry and writing and immortality for the future, and I'll forget about these petty worldly ambitions that I might have harbored in my bosom. So a nice poem, as opposed to the other ballads of his that we've been reading lately. This feels as if it can be personalized to express the soul and the thoughts of Levi. This one does not feel just like an empty exercise. So, nice poem.